Hey, everybody, I'm David Bloom with Next TMT Talks, and my co founder and co genius, Daniel Frankel, is here with me from the Auxiliary Bureau in the Coachella Valley of California, where he is roasting at, I think they call it around 32 degrees Celsius, which is toasty. But
Yeah, Celsius is hard for most Americans to understand, but that's hot. Yeah.
it's hot. Yeah. But just know 32 is not the same in Fahrenheit and Celsius. So there we are. Lots going on this week. We have a few things in the newsletter, and we'll talk about some of those, like this little $34.5 billion charter merger acquisition, pickup, roll up, whatever, of Cox, which is a big but privately held cable, broadband, et cetera, wireless, et cetera, connectivity player, but a lesser one. That's a big deal as we start to see some consolidation in a business that's not great. We also have some other fun stuff about NBC Universal doing the Tom Brady routine with Michael Jordan with his new NBA contract, giving him an eye-popping $40 million contract. And David Zaslav gets to be chief pinata officer for
Oh my God, they're
Warner.
coming after him.
Yeah. So let's
Overtakers.
with a fun one because it was Zaslav, man. I mean, and I'm much more sanguine about parts of Zaslav's regime.
It's those pictures, those AP pictures where he's coming out of like Sun Valley. Hey,
Hey, how you
I'm
doing?
rich.
Let's
Do
go
anything
cut
I want.
some divisions, man. Or like do another reorg, what could go
Let's
wrong?
play golf and fire people. Yes.
Play golf and fire people. That's a very Jack Welch thing where he learned at the knee of the Ripper himself, Jack Welch, and he's got
Jack
that.
Donaghy, I think of 30 Rock as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, this is a little bit of that going on. It's absolutely true. But
We also have our podcasts with Colin Petrie-Norris, the founder of Xumo, has founded a new generative AI TV series production arm called Fairground Entertainment, and I interviewed him on this channel.
on this channel, so same bad channel,
Yeah,
very different bad time, and it's all Dan by himself, and it's a lot of Dan. Just saying, it's a lot of Dan.
I lean back and let the storyteller tell the story, David. It's all
Washes
good.
over. Colin just AI washes over you. So artificially
So,
washes.
so kick us off. Tee me up, David. I'm ready.
All right, well, let's start with Zaslav. So they walked back during this was Upfronts week in New York, and all the
Right.
big media companies, including some you didn't used to expect, like YouTube, were there and had lots to say. Some of which was kind of interesting, little tidbits here and there. But one of the ones was, oh, by the way, we screwed up 2 years ago when we renamed HBO Max to Max, the most minimalist name of Max ever, and we're going to go back to HBO Max by this summer. And the mockery ensued. As I put it, a tsunami of Schadenfreude
Well,
was unleashed.
starting with AT&T buying Time Warner, AT&T spinning off Time Warner into Warner Media, Jason Kilar taking over, spending a bunch of money launching HBO Max after HBO Go. There's a lot of like change that happened before David Zaslav took over, and then kind of with a lot of hubris, as you recall, changed the brand. And and
Some big
and
paychecks. I mean, he's cashed in, no doubt.
and a lot of us had a deep connection to HBO. I mean, I don't know if there's anything in American literary or video history. I mean, it ranks up in a top 10 list somewhere. It's a masterpiece of work, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. So much good content over the years, such a premium brand. It really earned that distinction, and to subsume it so you could put Discovery reality shows, which I don't want to denigrate. They certainly have an audience, and it built a powerful brand for its own sake with them. But it's just peanut butter and chocolate. They didn't really
A little bit of Sesame Street, which, by the way, Zaslav got rid of, but it's one of these things that's not like the other, right? I mean, Discovery, crappy reality shows that are absolutely audience drivers, dirt cheap, get an advertiser base in there that's nice. You deliver a certain audience, it's hard to get, totally valuable, totally not going to say to anybody, put up your 10, 15, $20 a month for the privilege to watch this, right?
I went back in the Next TV Wayback Machine to 2022 or 20, somewhere where they announced the rebrand to Max. And you wrote at the time, I don't know what they're doing. I think they better know what they're doing. We all kind of shrugged and said that's a really bold move. And when it doesn't work and you flip-flop on it, it's not unforgivable. As who was it who said that he had the guts to realize he was wrong and he listened to us?
I said, yeah, right.
Yeah,
I didn't put it quite that way, but I did say that it's a sign of a good manager that when you screw up, you look at the facts, you look at
right.
the data. Casey Bloys, his HBO chief,
That's right.
said,
Right.
we took the data to him and he said, well, what are we going to do about this? So, but he did it. So that's actually an example that I want to acknowledge that he did the right thing. He screwed up. They fixed it. It's a couple of years in. It's not, they're at 120 million or so global subscribers to HBO Max, as it soon will once again be known. They've got this big international expansion still going on. They're finally on the positive side. It's adjusted EBITDA, which I hate, as opposed to like operating income, which is what Netflix
Yeah, you've
does.
always had a real balanced view of him. He has an unwieldy business that needed some decisions made.
Yeah, it had to come this decade. No doubt about that.
But Bob Iger kind of did the same thing. But I mean, I'm sure there are folks that have hard feelings, but
Yeah.
you don't hear nearly, there's not nearly as much antipathy in the marketplace. It's a really hard job. I mean, the politics involved with it can't be easy, but I just don't think that he handled it particularly well. And the animus in the marketplace, the Schadenfreude, as you said, is just really intense. If you look at social media, so many people, and they kind of conflate it with what's happening with Washington. A lot of very power hungry people coming in and getting over their skis with their jobs and making kind of a big mess. And
Yeah,
that's
right. The little Doge-like in that regard. But
right.
it's interesting because this happened at the same time or the same week that another big media company whose name you've already invoked, or at least its CEO's name you already invoked, realized, hey, we've got a really valuable media brand. Maybe we should stick with the really valuable media brand when we roll it out as a standalone direct-to-consumer app instead of calling it
Right.
ESPN flagship or I don't know, whatever they could call it, E with the P or something, whatever they could have called, they called it ESPN, which will cause some minor confusion. But the bottom line is it's ESPN. It's all of ESPN. It's not plus, it's not minus, which is really what ESPN Plus is. It's all of it, including ESPN Plus, actually. And great, $30 wrapped into a big old bundle. Great, fantastic. Makes lots of sense. Going to do great, I think. But they didn't screw it up. Maybe they learned something watching HBO Max.
I think they priced it at a level that their pay TV distribution partners will look at that and say that's a premium price. They're not getting it for free. It doesn't seem too cannibalistic. At the same time, it shows the brilliance that when involved with building the Disney Plus name, you can build bundles based on that. You can build your own distribution platform. They lost a ton of money, as you referenced last week. They spent $11.4 billion in losses from 2019 to 2024.
Yeah, that's a boatload of money. That's even more than I make as co-hosting this
Slightly.
horrible podcast.
Checks in the mail.
It's a little bit more than I make. It's actually pretty close to what I lose. But that being said, yeah, they lost a lot, but now they're making money and they're pointed in the right direction. The other one that, of course, caught I think both our eyes and that of analysts was a little more information about the long incoming Fox SVOD.
Before we go to that, and that's definitely that, but we got some, it's going to come out wide on Monday, but Hub gave it to us in time to put in our newsletter today, Monday. It shows the how consumers feel about streaming services. Is it something that you just pay for because it's like you said last week, a utility, it's a value like that?
Right.
Or is it an add-on and a bundle? I take it because I get it with other stuff.
Right.
And Disney Plus and Netflix are the only ones that didn't say because it comes in the bundle.
I feel like it's like though it's still kind of like tranches. So like there's Netflix,
Right.
and down a bit is Disney Plus and probably Amazon because it's thrown in and it's like, oh, you got to have Amazon Plus. Yeah, Amazon.
No, Amazon was a bundle offering, as was Hulu.
Yeah.
But Disney Plus stood out because of exclusive titles, they said.
Well, but Amazon Prime, well, what Amazon Prime is, it starts out as a bundle, right? It's bundled on to a bunch of other stuff that you actually really want. And oh, by the way, you get this too. It's like maybe you listen to Amazon Music, maybe you get the Amazon free book every month, whatever. But Amazon Prime Video is a little bit like that. It's already a bundle. So yes, but I'm just saying in terms of there's Netflix, and that's the water company. That's the power company, and it's Netflix, right? And my internet connection. And then down the next tranche down is Disney Plus. And then you start getting into those second level folks, or the specialty guys like AMC and stuff like that. Feels like.
So where's Fox going to fit? Fox One, as it's called.
First of all, we know it's called Fox One. Let's inveigh against this name because Fox One what? Can we that?
Sports. It's going to launch. And they made a point of saying it's going to launch in time for football season.
Okay, so it's like FS1 DTC. So it'll have football, obviously, because they've got big NFL and college.
Right. I can't imagine it won't have right-wing news. I mean, they're doing so. The audience is for Fox News. You think it would taper off after the election? Okay, you got your guy in the White House, go play golf, but everybody's still, the juice of sweet outrage still flows, and the numbers first quarter were just out.
Yeah, it's tough to beat that, but it is. I think it's still only a handful, a couple million, 3 million, which is huge on cable news. It's far outstrips anybody. But in the rest of the universe, it's like, okay. So it'll be interesting to see how much of Fox News gets in there. I will point out that the little streaming subscription service that they've had as fan service for 5 years now, Fox Nation.
Right.
They get very coy about how many subs they have, but they'll tell you, well, we don't release that information, but this story that estimates it's 2 million, that's not wrong, and it's more than that. So 2 to 3 million, right? 2 to 3 million, 5 years in, that is not driving big signups. Even if you're right that folks are signing on, listening to Fox News and all of that in the cable universe.
I hate that fecal matter. It's like, okay, we'll put the number down on a Post-it note. If I'm right, can you nod your head?
Right. No, it's a little bit. Number. It's like, this is not freaking Watergate, for God's sakes. This is just the viewership of the 38th biggest streaming subscription service in America or something. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. But the fact that they won't tell you says that there's not much there. It's just a nice little business for hardcore fans of Fox News, a hugely successful in its own little pond, hugely successful, outsized influence, but still limited operation. So news and sports, obviously Fox One, but premium priced, out before football comes on. So sports is probably going to be their big draw, right? Every division of what's left. Let's just be clear. They sold $71 billion worth of Fox.
I know, but the pieces that are left are really profitable.
And the ones they left, I mean, I think Rupert wanted to make sure he had some stuff that could run itself, basically, because he wasn't counting on his boys to figure it out. Particularly, I mean, Lachlan agrees with him ideologically, but I had always heard that Rupert just wanted to make sure he didn't have something that the kid could screw up too much. And he's going to be in charge. And I call him a kid, and he's probably as old as I am, and I'm old. So it'll be interesting to see how that well-oiled machine continues to crank along. They are still built on broadcasting cable. Is Tubi going to be everything? I'm going to have a Tubi executive on a panel I'm doing. I may have a Tubi executive, which would be great because they can talk about things like
record engagement, record turnout. It's just record MAUs every time I tune in.
Yeah.
What I thought was interesting about Monday's earnings report when they were talking about Fox One was they really have thought about what it is as a mechanism, and it's 60 million cord cutters, cord nevers, kind of a youthful audience that isn't that 25 to 54 demographic that's dying out with cable news. And
that's not 25 to 54. 25 to 54 is the what they want. What's dying out is the
62 to 78
to 89 demographic that really watches 28 hours a day of Fox News. Yeah. That's
anyway, I'll stop praising Lachlan Murdoch. It does no good for anybody, but I'm going to be curious to see what it turns out to be. I won't pay for it, but
Yeah. It will be interesting because, yes, that's an audience, 60 million younger-ish. Younger doesn't mean young, but younger. and possibly right in the wheelhouse of advertisers. Great. You're going to get the data, the first party data, which Laura Martin, said in a thing I did, an analyst from Needham and Company, that's the first party data. They don't have to be huge for the first party data to be valuable. And they can make a little money off of training, selling training data and all that to the LLMs, the AI, large language models. But if you're not going to splash out a lot of cash for original programming, and you're not going to splash out a lot of cash for marketing, what dent do you make in an oversaturated market? You pointed out that Hub is talking about, there's a little data point that you mentioned that I thought was really interesting, which is a year ago, 61% had at least three. I think it was at least three of the top 7 streaming services. And now it's down to 52%. So it's down 9 points in a year. And that's more than the margin of error on a sample size. I think it was 1,600. That's a pretty good sample size for a survey. So that's a significant drop in the number of folks who actually have at least 3 of the big 7. What is Fox One going to displace? Now, maybe they'll.
I suspect a roundtable discussion show, the Pete Hegseth group. A bunch of his friends sitting around a hot tub, drinking beer with their Iron Cross tattoos, talking about the issues of the day to the bottom of it.
Well, I mean, and Pete's probably going to be available soon, given that there have been rumbles about him getting segued on. So we'll see. And he can go back to drinking without guilt and whatever else happens out of that.
Consulting is part of what we do here at Next TMT. If you just try to pitch that.
Yeah.
We'll go back to talking about the business here. We'll speculate.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I do want to circle back to, though, is the Charter-Cox deal. There's a couple things we mentioned in passing. Oh, by the way, you think this one's clean? It's built to get approved, right? It's going to just slide on through because John Malone gave $2 million to the Trump campaign, and Johnny Malone knows how to make stuff work because John Malone is basically the god of cable, right? He's the godfather of cable, period, and has been for 40 years, since at least the 1990s. So this one looks like it's going to slide through, but you pointed out, and I thought it was good. Oh, by the way, Cox also owns this other thing called Axios, a terrific media company, but it's tucked away in the Cox family holdings, and it annoys the crap out of Trump on pretty much an hourly basis. So is that going to come up and be the spanner in the works for this possible M&A deal?
I don't know if it's 60 Minutes, but I betcha it's an issue. Donald Trump has proven if he can leverage some control over media, he's going to try. And it's not the kind of revenue center that would hold up, a $35 billion deal. You could see Cox Enterprises divesting it or otherwise making it go away. So,
selling it to Axel Springer or something.
It's going to be called Cox Communications, combined company. And
that was surprising, though. I got to tell you, that was surprising because here we've been talking about brands and naming and all that stuff. And okay, you're going to go with the smaller company instead of a much bigger one. You're going to go the one that's big in Atlanta and San Diego and not a lot of other places. You're going to put that name on things? Why? Because you can make more off-color jokes about its name or what?
I don't know. I mean, I do know that the decision this is Tom Rutledge, the previous CEO before Christopher Winfrey, repatriated the call centers. This is when they bought Time Warner. And that smoothed the bridge to that merger. They also bought Bright House Networks at that time. It was such an active time for mergers. You had AT&T buying DirecTV and so much going on, Sprint and T-Mobile. And you think it's been a pretty dry decade since then.
Well, we did have a little pandemic, but I mean, the thing is, though, Charter spent a ton of money. I mean, they've been making a big deal out of the Charter Spectrum, the select thing with all the streaming services piled in with all the traditional cable, and it's a great package, and we've written about it a lot. It's great, fantastic, but now they're going to just say, "Oh, that doesn't matter. Let's go with Cox," because nothing says premium experiences like Cox Communication.
I have taken Spectrum products for 5 years and always had a good experience. I don't want to denigrate Far Eastern call centers. The economics make sense and everybody's got to work. But when you are speaking to a person, there's no language barrier, it makes it a lot easier. And I think that goes a long way in terms of their customer experience. And the fact
I just want to say though, it's not just that, but that helps, sure.
anyway,
Totally makes
in
sense.
the press release,
The systems are good though. The systems are really good about, it's not just the people who are kind and helpful and all that. They don't sound like they're oppressed on a daily basis.
they don't.
So it's a better experience, it feels like.
So Cox, they made a point of saying it in the press release. They're going to put America first by repatriating Cox's call centers too. They call the stuff Spectrum or Cox is unclear, the actual branding of the services. But it's not your old cable monopoly. They face pressure from wireless fixed access, wireless fiber. They've had
wireless, because their big growth area is wireless.
Squeezed out of
right?
video by the streaming companies. They've been squeezed out of government subsidies by Republican lawmakers who ended the
rural
right.
broadband subsidies. Yeah.
So there's a lot of headwind and plus you have Rutledge in the corner who knows the chessboard for regulation. So a lot in their favor. I don't think Axios will get in the way, but I think it will come out.
It'll be interesting to see too, because their move is a smart one, probably doable because they don't overlap, because it's cable. They have their own stuff. And there is, as you say, it's actually useful from a regulatory standpoint or regulatory response to be able to say, hey, we've got all these different competitors in these different parts of our business, and we need to be able to scale up to just to be able to compete. But it's, I think it was the guys over at Lightshed, Rich Greenfield and those guys, who said that, Charter's making a bold, smart move. Everyone else seems stuck. And that's Comcast, Altus, et cetera. They all stuck. And for whatever reason, Comcast is, moving forward. They speaking of brands, they said they got a name on SpinCo now. It's Versant.
Yeah.
Which I'm not conversant in. It doesn't really say anything to me. And we are just talking about names this week, man. It's really something, but it is about like, where are you going to put your flag in the ground and get people to come gather around? And Versant ain't going to be it, but they seem to think it's going to be well funded and ready to get into some stuff. I think what was his name, Armstrong?
Dave Watson, the cable CEO.
Yeah. Said, they're going to be well funded and they're going to get into some digital things that we didn't think of. And I actually think that that's a pretty important self-indictment, because Comcast really wasn't thinking about some stuff, it felt like.
It's kind of like, when you're the head of the Department of Health and you say, don't come to me for medical advice. It's not a good look.
It's not a good look. It's not a good look. And there they were, but that's how it goes. So you think the Cox deal go through? I'm not clear we're going to get more deals, but probably more deals need to happen. Altus is a mess, right? That's a mess. So feels like somebody could pick it up. I just don't know who.
It's when regulation is devolved into this little petty ideological score settling. How do you do business? How does Comcast, they need a big move, like you said, but how do they do it when they're being publicly scorned by the leader of the free world? It's tough. What did he call them?
I mean, it's heartbreaking. I mean, Don Trump won't answer my calls. It's terrible. That being said, I'm thinking you're pretty excited about some stuff. Actually, we both are, about some media things coming up. So you got jazzed about ESPN, the standalone app, having a movie.
And you got overwhelmed by NBC Universal.
Let me finish. You're big on Madden and big football game too. I mean, football video game as well. And the EA Sports people that I'll be talking with about F1 25, I'll be talking about with Madden NFL as well, because, it's a big deal. And so they do have a Formula One deal between Apple, Warner Brothers, EA, the game guys, and music from a super group of Dave Grohl from Foo Fighters and Nirvana, and John Mayer, who's occasionally not dead in the Grateful Dead, and Ed Sheeran, who pumps out hit records. Like, I think basically when he wakes up in the morning, he says, "I'm going to write another one." He's like, "Boom, there's another one." He's like John Belushi's Picasso. He's got to cover his bar tab, so he writes a hit song. It's kind of like that. So
Yeah, the
but
emergence of Formula One. A decade ago, schlubs in the United States, like myself, didn't know this. This was a young sort of super athlete, freakish reflexes and endurance sport. And you had Netflix that did the docu-series and kind of introduced.
no,
Yeah,
for that, and I strongly recommend people track this down. The documentary Senna
sure.
about Ayrton Senna from the 90s and his competition and his huge competition with another great Formula One guy. Senna, spoiler alert, didn't survive the competition, but it is a fantastic documentary. And then they got to Drive to Survive, which turned it into like a mass thing. And it did the Netflix thing. All of a sudden, this thing you've never heard of becomes really
Right.
big, right?
Well, I
Suits
mean, you could say it
Formula
was having a
One.
moment 5 years ago, and it just keeps on proliferating. Like you said, it's sort of a cross-platform phenomena, and the U.S. popularity kind of just expands and expands. So,
Yeah, I mean, and Formula One rights, I think, are still up. They went from 5 million a year in the United States to 75 million a year, and now they're going to run out. And I think there's some interest. We'll see if Netflix goes and buys into those, at least for like the U.S. races. I
I
think there's
thought
three of them now.
ESPN
After
bought that up.
they did, but I think, and I could be wrong because that has happened, that there was some other opportunities, but I may be wrong. So, but the fact is that it went from 5 to 75 says a
Right.
lot, right? From Drive to Survive to 75 million is a nice little chunk of change. That covers a whole lot of champagne bottles at the
Buys you a
finish
few
line.
tires for sure. As far as
Not that many though, not in Formula One. It's like they don't even have treads on them, and they're expensive, man. It's
as
crazy.
far as
So
Madden, Christian Bale is one of those actors. He's in it. Okay, I'm in. I'll check it out. It kind of upgrades anything he's in. It's like
yeah,
Denzel. He's
yeah,
gonna like make the thing work. Uh,
right.
is the folks in Hollywood who don't hang out with him say Nick Cage, Nicholas to me. I don't know. I feel like as John Madden, David O. Russell, he's a good filmmaker. He knows what he's doing. What do you think of this? I look at that picture and I say that looks like compelling television.
It's like, yeah, he looks like early Madden before Madden got
Yeah.
big. And yes, Christian Bale, big shock, has turned himself into a very passable visual analog of Al Davis, and I'm sure gives a compelling just win baby kind of thing. So it'll be fun to see that dynamic.
Say separate from the column, if you ever want a really 40-minute entertaining watch, I think it's on Peacock or one of the secondary premium services, not i.e. not Netflix. It's the old NFL Films documentary about the 1975 when the Raiders were just emerging and the Dolphins were their bottom.
They were kind of coming down, the Raiders were coming up.
Right. Anyway, it's a very tense game, won in the last minute by Kenny Stabler and the Raiders. And it was sort of the Raiders' big sort of coming out party in that era. They had
Like 3 years earlier, the Dolphins were undefeated, only team to go all the way through and undefeated, and they were the powerhouse team. And so then these guys come up, and Kenny the Snake takes it. I'm actually sort of also intrigued. Glenn Powell is doing something for Hulu that feels a little Ted
yeah,
Lasso-ish.
I want to get into that. But what was
Yeah.
interesting about this documentary, it shows sort of a primordial state of the NFL. I mean, after they're leaving the field, the Dolphin players get attacked by Oakland fans, Raider fans. They had a reputation in the day, and a couple of them just
In the
they laid them
day,
out. They
like
just the
every day.
linebacker,
What are you talking
the
about?
linebacker, one of the linebackers for the Dolphins just nearly killed a guy with his fist, and that kind of security lapse would not happen in today's hyper-produced game. You didn't have 4K in those days. It was a very kind of wild frontier, but you kind of
You barely had K. I mean, not
the
from
passion and the drama, you can see how they built their brand. I mean,
sure, sure. But I have to say, you got to be really drunk and really full of yourself to think, oh, I'm going to go up to an NFL linebacker and see how that goes. You know, it's like the guy who picks the fight with Charles Barkley in the bar 25 years ago and magically ends up going through the plate glass window.
I remember that.
Like,
Oh,
yeah, like that was kind of in the cards. Like from the moment you said, I'm going to go talk to Charles Barkley and tell him he's fat, you know, it's like, yeah, I don't think that's a
Charles
really
always
good
had a flair.
idea.
If he's going to beat up a fan, he's not just going to punch him. He's going to throw him through a big window.
Through the window, which is kind of what you need to do. I mean, because it's just dumb and it's inappropriate. And so,
Hulu, sorry.
Hulu. Well, Hulu's they're trying to do a Ted Lasso thing with Glenn Powell, who's had a really nice run in the last couple of years. To me, it's going to go three ways. They're going to be Ted Lasso, huge hit, because Powell's pretty engaging. Could be Running Point, which is that pretty fun Lakers sort of comedy with Kate Hudson that was actually a pretty good look at an NBA franchise. At the same time, it was very much tongue-in-cheek and all that. Or Uncle Drew, which was Kyrie Irving doing an ad for Nike, and then it became a movie.
I saw that movie.
Of course you did. Yes. And it was probably not an awesome movie.
It was not.
I'm guessing.
A colleague, I was in a colleague's neck of the woods, and he wanted to see that movie. And okay. So, yeah, I saw the trailer. Looked vaguely interesting. When you bring up Lakers inspired content, I think a winning time, and the fact that it'll never be on television again. And
yeah, and that was a great show. It was a really great show. It was very well done.
If we had been doing this podcast, was it 2 or 3 years ago when it got canceled, I would have devoted an entire episode to winning time.
That does not sound like a winning idea. As great as the show was, and as well as they did at portraying many, if not all, of the unique characters of the Lakers in the 70s, from Jerry Buss on down, Jerry West never forgave those guys, and I don't think Jeannie Buss did either. But I don't know if they're ever going to get a courtside seat.
Well, they may be canceled, but who's still in production are the New York Knickerbockers.
Well, if you want to ride or die with those guys, I mean, Jalen Brunson's great.
They defend. Tom Thibodeau makes them defend to get a bunch of.
But Tom Thibodeau makes them win to a point. Name how many championships does Tom Thibodeau have?
Defensive coach for the Celtics. He has one. I mean, that 2008 Celtics championship team. I mean, it was Doc Rivers who.
Okay, so
how many titles has Doc Rivers
17 years ago, when he was an assistant coach, a team that had 3 Hall of Famers on it managed to scratch out a single season
after
win.
that season,
and it was all downhill from there.
This thing of theirs, the NBA, the coaching thing, getting people motivated, getting them to play hard, getting them to play at that level of intensity, not easy to do. And the Knicks, they bring it every game. They've captured my heart from across the country. I hope they win it all.
Well, you certainly have suddenly become entranced by that basketball mecca, Madison Square Garden, even though Jim Dolan still owns it and plays guitar.
Straight Shot. Yeah. I want to visit Madison Square Garden to see the Straight Shot.
Oh man, that's hardcore. You know, I actually things I'm not going to be doing, catching Jimmy's next performance, but we'll see how they do. I mean, it'll be the real nightmare for the NBA is what happens if Indiana, which ripped through number 1 seed Cleveland in 4 games to 1, takes on a wiped out, worn out Knicks team and knocks them out and goes to the finals.
Yeah,
against Oklahoma City. That is 2 of the smallest sports markets in America on your premier
Dave,
championship.
I've always felt since you left the plains of Missouri, you kind of forgotten where you came from. Out here, we look the man in the eye, we shake his hand.
No, you don't. You stab him in the back, and you go out with his ex-wife. You know,
we get to know him a little better.
That's what they do out here. Well, her, not necessarily the guy you stabbed in the back. No, I mean, look, I love Oklahoma City, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. I love all that stuff. But the reality is, from the NBA standpoint and from Warner Brothers Discovery's standpoint, I guess it doesn't really matter because they're heading out the door and they're not gonna do the finals. It's going to be Disney. but or ESPN. It is not promising for the
I
ratings,
think it would
is
be
all I will
yeah,
say,
you look at
even though
those ratings for what was it, 2007, the Cleveland Cavaliers versus the San Antonio Spurs.
before Tom Thibodeau got a hold of the
Right.
defense
And you
over at
don't
the
have
Celtics.
who's the young incendiary star? They have a number of great young players.
Tyrese Halliburton.
No, for Oklahoma City, yeah, the three-name boy. Yes.
Oh, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's fantastic. He's beautiful to watch. Leading scorer, probably the MVP of the league this year, but the leading scorer and a top-notch defensive player and silky smooth 6'7"
Like
point guard. He's
Anthony Edwards
amazing.
from
He's amazing, and
Minnesota,
it's
you don't know him yet on a mainstream level, but you will. I mean, he's that good. Yeah.
well,
Um,
right, right. Well, it's interesting because Edwards is getting the big sort of promotional opportunities with the various companies in ways that Gilgeous-Alexander isn't, perhaps because he's coming from Oklahoma City, which is such a small market. Perhaps that's why. I think this will, if he gets the MVP and they manage to make it the finals, never mind win, and maybe he'll take off. But that collection, it's the youngest team in the league and the winningest team this year with the likely MVP. And they've got a boatload of draft picks and stuff to keep reloading.
they
So
just
they're
they tear it down and build it up one after the other. They're such brilliant architects there. I mean, I loathe that they had to, with the help of Howard Schultz, take Seattle's franchise to build what they've built. But you can't argue with it hasn't been a title, but they've done everything but an NBA title.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't want to lose. Also at the upfronts
Oh,
this week was
I'm gonna
YouTube.
let you lead
So
us out of this, but
a
I need to
couple
go back
fun.
to the NBA because there's go ahead when you're done.
Okay. I also want to not lose track of other upfront bits and pieces of news. I'm really intrigued by this move that YouTube has done to encourage its big creators who've got
Yeah.
big libraries to impose a linear TV like structure of episodes and seasons on there. And they say it'll be fully in place by this summer, but it's some of these guys have already begun doing it. And the YouTube guys tell me they're seeing big uptick in viewership, binge watching just one
Right.
through a whole season for these folks that have already begun doing this. And to my mind, it's like, oh, great. The guys that are already leading in watch time have got another way to boost watch time, and Fox, good luck with that, So I just think it's
It
really
is.
interesting to see where that's going. They are doing that. They're doing that Brazil first NFL game
Right.
on YouTube free. So that feels big too.
Uh,
So what do you think?
yeah. I mean, which we talked about last week. The so many ways they slice the NFL lintel, and now they're 18 regular season games, and I do think you can make it too much of a marathon. You dilute the importance of each game. Yeah.
Gas baseball, right?
And it's
Speaking of
not like,
marathons,
baseball and basketball are grueling, repetitive wear, fatiguing sports, but football is a whole nother level. I mean, it's just so hard to not avoid an injury
yeah,
for that span. So wish them the best. I'll watch the product, but I don't know if the
yeah,
expansion is good. I want to get back to the NBA for a second. This is the last series, the Indiana New York series that TNT will broadcast. The inside the NBA crew will still see them, but not as much as part of ESPN's coverage. But that is, we as a media on media business, we've covered that ad nauseum. But I think the moment's kind of here. This is a big moment. This is the first time in decades
yeah.
that Turner won't be involved.
I wanna, by the way, throw in. I just read a piece this morning from the New Yorker, an interview with Kenny the Jet Smith about kind of all that stuff, and they still don't know yet if it's going to be 15 minutes, if it's going to be an hour, what's it going to be? Because you're going to be on ESPN, the app, and you don't have to cut to the next show in the program guide. They can run. So what are they going to do? What's that going to look like? And they still don't know. They're really happy they're still there, and they clearly are one of the
Yeah.
landmark shows. And television of the last 50 years.
Yeah, these
So
are former players, and a lot of their success was sort of instinctual. And you tell them, okay, you feel like they just, with the production restrictions, the commercials, etc., they had just enough rope to do what they needed to do, enough structure.
yeah, yeah, it'll be interesting as a licensed product. If somebody steps in it, they can get zapped in a heartbeat. And they're getting up there. Ernie Johnson is probably late 60s. Shaq is in good shape, but that's a big man to be carrying a house on your back for your whole life. And Charles does not look like the healthiest fellow. I think he's in his 60s now. So it'll be interesting to see how long they could keep that ball rolling, even with the move to a new gym, as it were. Though I certainly hope they can keep it going for a while because they are deeply entertaining. But I enjoy this. This is a moment. This series is a moment at the end of a specific era. And what comes out of it next year will be fun to watch, but it's a whole different
You mentioned those three
dynamic.
personalities,
So
and what makes them so successful is, these are three guys that Barkley doesn't have a title. I know it's a big thing, but he's won MVPs. He's played at the highest level and played for one. These guys have lived legendary careers. They're in the Hall of Fame, and they make each other laugh at themselves. And that's like they're really human and they're warm and fuzzy. And you get that with like the best NBA former player personalities. Like Reggie Miller is really kind of a very human, lots of good anecdotes, and turned into an excellent color guy, one of the best ever.
yeah, he did. But it's interesting because in this same interview, Kenny Smith who played college basketball at North Carolina with Michael Jordan, is not excited to hear Michael as a color commentary guy for NBC's new NBA coverage at 40 million a year. So I don't think Michael, speaking of warm and fuzzy, I don't think Michael's going to have some sudden personality implant. He's still going to be a chap ass with some strong opinions freely shared, but I don't know. I don't know how it's
There
going to
was
play.
the
So
documentary on Netflix that ran during the pandemic. It was so, I mean,
yeah, ran repeatedly in the pandemic because there was nothing else for 3 months.
we had sports for months and we just all gathered around the fire. But it was compelling television, then some. But there was not one moment of humanity or warmth or fuzziness in that man. And you hear anecdotes and people who know him, and you see his kind of petty, small Hall of Fame acceptance speech. Listen, Mark Jackson said it. To him, there's this greatest player debate. I kind of agree with Mark Jackson. He had no weaknesses. There was nothing you could exploit on him, and he never, just an impenetrable record, from winning six straight titles, the MVPs, the scoring titles, defensive player of the year. He is the best player ever, undisputed. I think that the traits that made him that, the killer he was, kind of work against him as a likable personality. And that doesn't, do you want Ty Cobb hosting like, Inside Baseball?
An
It's not.
interesting choice because Ty Cobb was probably a member of the Ku Klux Klan, a notorious racist who, unfortunately, for decades held the hit record for the Major League Baseball. Though I have to say, I was deeply delighted to see the Veterans Committee that spent like 20 years combing through records of all the Negro League players and said, I think Josh Gibson actually had more real hits in real competitive baseball than Ty the Jerk. And knowing that a black man, a prodigiously talented person who wasn't allowed to play in the Major League Baseball, was able to be the all-time hits leader makes me feel good. I don't even want to know how the counting happened, but Ty Cobb at
Right.
second makes me happy. And you're right. I don't want to put Jordan in the same boat as an awful human being like Ty Cobb, but yes, it'll be interesting to see if he delivers $40 million worth of enjoyment. So,
Ty Cobb famously flew into bases with
like Ty,
spikes
yeah.
high. Jordan wasn't a dirty player. I don't want to. He's lived a clean. He hasn't been in jail or done anything outside of a few extramarital affairs, really unseemly.
Well, he's a big gambler, but
Yeah, you put him in commercials, he's fine, but I think you put him on television for prolonged periods of time. Not many of us can do it. I think it's really hard, and you have the greatest player of
yeah,
all time. Look at the pressure on Tom Brady.
yeah.
He goes in and he's not spectacular his first season, and all of a sudden the narrative turned on him pretty fast.
I do want to say that it's interesting to note that Mike's done a lot of ads. He doesn't do a lot of talking in his ads, and I think that says something of its in its own right. I mean, how many ads does Michael Jordan say more than 5 words?
He's a smart guy, and obviously people forget that he was starting to learn how to hit that curveball. And if you could hit 200 or above in professional baseball at any level without playing since high school, impressed me enough. He's determined. I'm sure he'd like to hear some punk on a newsletter calling him out. So,
Yeah, well, that's what we're here for. So anyway, well, I think we ought to be wrapping this one up. But Daniel, thank you. As always, we are prepping for the big Stream TV conference in about 4 weeks, 3.5 weeks. So that is a wrap on this week's Next TMT. If you like what you hear, please go to Spotify, like it, subscribe, keep on listening, and you can go to nexttmt.com and get our newsletter delivered fresh and hot every week into your mailbox and free and full of smart stuff. So join us on this great journey into the unknown.
the future of entertainment, you figure it all out in 25, 40 minutes. Okay. All right. Well, I'll be looking
I
forward to
can
that. And in the
build you a
meantime,
quick.
get this column out, and I'll talk to you again in a week. Bye.
I can build you a little thing that's going to be ours, so we don't have to do it. I mean, I go into Logic and loop some stuff together, and boom. Any sensibility you want me to aim toward as I'm creating this aural landscape? You'll need to send that to me because it's right at my fingertips. Yeah, I'm thinking now I need to get like Evelyn Champagne King for like Soccer Made in Germany in 1976 with the saxophone. That's yeah, sultry. That is the word people think about when they think about Daniel Frankel and David Bloom. Sultry. Sultry. That actually is better. Sultry, particularly when you're sweating it up in the Coachella Valley.
I don't know about
Sultry is totally
standardizing, but
it.
music might, if you want to experiment with
Like
that.
you're just laying around in a desultory fashion in salt beds. Sweat. No. Okay. Check it out. We'll find something.
The Jazz opening to the LA Kings 1975 season on KHJTV with the Bongos. I will.
All
I
right.
will. That's what they want. I
See what we
think
can do.
it says what we want to
Sounds
say.
good. All right.
So,
Thanks, guys. Bye.
oh, that's sultry. That's kind of our brand. He's clever, huh? So, David, have you happened to see Roy Price's new Substack? I'll send it to you. It's interesting. We'll find some by Thursday.